now.
Radio 2.
This is Steve Wright in his own words.
BBC Radio 2.
Hello, I'm Paul Gambaccini. Welcome to Steve Wright in his own words.
Here's Dave Doubledeck.
It's here on Radio Local, just warming up before the programme, as they say.
Dear Steve, my wife Kay and I have been together since she was 12 and I 13. That was 27 years ago. That's a bit young to marry, don't you think? Oh, I see.
Steve Wright.
Yes, sir.
This is me again from Purley, Mr. Angry.
Mr.
I'm ringing
Angry.
you about a couple of things in the paper today.
Oh, yeah. Is that Elvis? Elvis is in the
right
building.
here, fellas.
Oh,
right. I was hiding under the table for the whole time.
Is that where you were? All right, you're on the big show. We've had a letter from somebody who wants to know what equipment I've got. We're talking about the equipment in the studio here, and loads of people ask me this stuff. They say, well, where do all those noises come from, and how do you get things to come in on time? Do you want to know? Should we do this? All right. What's this called? You know, what's that, a cart machine, is it? That's a cartridge machine. We got 5 cartridge machines here. Come in, mate, you tell them. How many cartridge machines do we have, Graham?
There's 5 in the studio, Steve.
5 cartridge machines.
Outside.
Okay, now those have the jingles on, right?
No, that's a jingle there.
That's a jingle. Okay, should we put a jingle on?
Yeah, put one of those jingles in there.
Put one of those in. That comes out of a cart machine like that.
Steve Wright in the morning.
Then on the left of me, Graham, what we got here?
Well, some people might call it a record player, but we call it a gram.
A gram, okay, and it goes...
We built this city, it is city.
Okay, and then we got another one on my right side and another one at the back of me. We bung the old, bit of backing music on there like that. Then we got 2 more cartridge machines over here, which I haven't learned how to use yet. What do they come up on, Graham?
Those are 1 and 2. You've got...
Oh, do they work as well?
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Microphone here.
Microphone,
okay.
yeah.
Got another one over there, right?
Yeah.
Anything else we can tell him about?
Just a heap of money for feeding the meter. That's
You got the money there?
Yeah.
Okay. You want to give me that? Okay, I'll put that on there for later. Telephone balancing unit. People.
Lots of lights. Tell us when the place is on fire.
Plants.
Plants. Yeah, plants
No.
are very essential to radio.
We're losing it a bit now. Thank you.
She touched by me in painted on jeans.
In this tribute to our friend, we'll hear Steve talking about his radio heroes and recalling his own broadcasting career. Steve enjoyed discussing people on the radio that he admired and was inspired by, but much less keen to talk about himself. Nevertheless, sourced from archive interviews recorded with Tim Blackmore, Kevin Howlett, Sean Tilley, and myself, over a period spanning from the 1980s to just a few years ago, over the next 2 hours, Steve guides us through his remarkable life on the air. Much of my interview from 2010 has never been broadcast until now. At times, you may be surprised by Steve's rather modest view of what he achieved through over 4 decades on national radio. But you know, and I know, Steve is one of the greats. I said so after his passing in many formats. I recognized in Steve one of the true lifers, somebody who had dedicated his whole life to radio. He cared about it. And thus, he was far more interested in what had inspired his inspirations than in his own work. He knew what he was doing because he was doing it. He wanted to know how Kenny Everett came to use the studio as an instrument, which, of course, Steve himself did. I used the analogy of a human octopus. You watch Steve at work, and he had more carts in a single link than there were cart machines. His arms were flying. Kenny, of course, picked certain tracks and artists to frame the mood of his program. For him, it was the Beatles, the Beach Boys, Queen. But for Steve, it was songs like Harden My Heart, or Zoom, or Love is in the Air. You felt at home when you were hearing those songs. And, of course, Steve just kept doing the work for decades, just as Kenny Everett had done before him. He never got tired of thinking of a new program. And when the program was over, he started thinking of the next one. Radio was his life. And that's why we are so pleased to salute the life of Steve Wright.
Thank you.
Radio 1 FM.
There is no substitute for experience.
Imagine a radio show that gives you lifestyle news, the best variety of current hits and oldies. Imagine a radio show with star guests and showbiz gossip. Imagine a radio show with humorous characters and all the travel news you'll ever need. A radio show pursued with vigor and bursting with energy. Imagine a radio show that gives you all that every day.
Steve Wright in the afternoon.
Radio 1 FM, where no commercials means more music.
I don't think, for my part, I'm locked into a particular era because I've always tried to rise above that and be contemporary and play contemporary music. And thus not associating myself with any particular genre. Although, having said that, if I am locked into an era, I like to play those 70s LA hits. Like Quarter Flash, Harden My Heart, because they make you feel good.
At the beginning of my 2010 interview, I asked Steve what his first memory of listening to a radio program was.
I think it's probably Saturday Club with Brian Matthew, and I remember that he always used to have the Beatles on every week. And I'm thinking, why has he got the Beatles on every week? And then, of course, it all took off, and they suddenly became wildly popular, and then I understood. I liked Brian because he was somehow official. He was like an official BBC voice, but at the time he was very cool and very authoritative and seemed to know Paul McCartney and John Lennon and the rest of the Beatles. So that was my first inkling that there was radio that was a little more entertaining than orchestras and all the other stuff that went before it. I mean, the first thing I ever heard on radio, I think, was probably the Archers theme tune. So after that, everything was a slight improvement.
What happened to our request, Brian Bath Tubes? We'll get you. We know you, Pete.
Yeah, we sent it about 2 weeks ago and you haven't played it, have you, eh?
No, he hasn't played it, has he? Oh, no. Not him, oh, no.
Don't play our request.
Bad Christmas to you, anyway.
Have you done?
Yeah.
Well, all right, then. Now read somebody else's request.
Dear John, would you please play this boy by the...
Get on with it.
Fabulous Beatles, thank you. For all those with it. Teenagers who went to Rose's party 2 weeks ago, especially for Mike Spragg. And Pete Dobson. If you do play this record for us, we'll send you a parcel of jam butties for Christmas from Jerry and Rose.
And
thanks.
I think George has got one as well.
And here's another request for our record of this boy for myself and my friend Pearl Dandy from Teresa Brooks.
I didn't know you knew Pearl Dandy.
Didn't you? And we'd just like to say that this isn't our record at all. It's us singing it, actually in the studio, performing it. You'll notice the difference as we go along.
What would they be without amplifiers?
I lived for a while in a place called Prittlewell in Southend-on-Sea. So I love the Pirates because obviously we could get all of the Pirates. I knew of Radio England. I knew of Radio 390, which was that was a kind of like soft music station. Hello everyone, this is Radio 390. And now here's Frank Chaxfield and the orchestra.
And I loved Radio Caroline and Radio London, Radio England and Britain Radio. I heard all of those. That was so exciting. I mean, these people were insane. These people were wild. And I thought, surely they can't be allowed to do all of that. Is there somebody standing there telling them they can't do that? They can't enjoy themselves that much on radio. And what I loved about pirate radio was that they were in love with their music. They were in love with the whole pirate thing. The fact that they were offshore and they were maybe slightly illegal. We were told at the time it was illegal to listen to them. So we thought that was great. Let's all listen.
Well, I heard Dave Dennis as he went off tell us the weather, cloudy and cold with the possibility of light snow or sleet showers in some areas. Sounds pretty grim, doesn't it? Still, as I say, not to worry about the weather. You've always got Radio London, and you and I and all our Radio London personalities, I'm sure, are going to have a ball over the weekend. In the meantime, here's Mr. Tom Jones.
It's great to be with you on your own show, Tony, and in your own immortal words, hello from yours truly, Tom Jones. Thank you and Radio London for spinning my new disc. It's not unusual.
It's not unusual to be loved by anyone. It's not unusual to find that I'm in love with you.
I used to like a fella called Keith Skews. Keith Skews and Cardboard Shoes. He used to have a kind of tongue-in-cheek style, if you like. He was an early Terry Wogan. You could just hear something in his voice that told you that he really didn't give a damn. You know, it was either take it or leave it. I'm sat here and I'm doing this kind of stuff for you, and if you like it, you like it. You like my attitude. If you don't, well, go somewhere else. And he had this sardonic, satirical style that appealed to me personally. And even though Keith was a very, very good newsreader and a fine announcer, he could pull it together when he wanted to. But mainly you could tell by listening to him, by listening to the inflections in his voice, that what he really enjoyed doing the most was having a good old lark about.
Rockabye, babe. The Cradle of Love, recorded by Johnny Preston. I was yonks ago. In fact, when that record was in the charts, I was at the British Forces Network in Germany. In fact, I was looking through some old charts. This is where I get all these dates from, date dropping lately. February the 17th, 1960, it was number 2 in our BFN charts over there. So, you know, it sort of dates it, doesn't it? All right? Pardon? I can't hear you. Speak up. 1960, Mrs. Woman. That's 7 years ago this very day. Right, you're listening to The Wireless, ladies and gentlemen.
Most DJs will say that Alan Freeman is one of their heroes, and I must confess that Alan Freeman is one of mine. I always used to listen to Alan on the BBC, and really, over the years, Alan hasn't changed at all, but you love him for it. He is like an institution. And I do remember listening to Alan. Alan was one of the few people on the BBC at that time who was actually different. He had a style of his own. He was interesting. His inflections, the way that he said things, was interesting to me. And that's really what I liked about Alan. And again, he had that excitement, and you could hear it in his voice, the enthusiasm for the work.
It's Big Al.
Oh, Fluff, you are awful, but I like you.
Welcome, everyone. Tuesday, August 1 at 3. We must get that fan club going with Johnny Walker, that's for sure. Thanks, Tom, for the programme between 1 o'clock and 3 o'clock. And ladies and gentlemen, welcome between 3 and 5 on Radio 1. And here we go with this one.
Millions of people tune into radio shows where the music is the priority, is the most important thing. And I used to listen to Johnny Walker in the early days, and I suppose in a sense he turned me on to soul music. He used to love soul music. and he used to have a thing on Radio Caroline in the early days where he was on the ship, and he used to have people come down to the coast, set their cars up pointing at the ship, and he used to ask them to flash their lights.
Hey, we can see you at Frinton. Naughty people, fancy listening to Radio Caroline. 90 minutes.
Now that is as ridiculous as having a ventriloquist on radio, which also they did in the early days. But for some reason, the imagery of that worked in my head as I was sat there listening to him very late at night.
Beautiful record there. That's on Phillips Records. Karen Young singing a song called I Heart Won't Go Away on Norwell Radio Caroline. It's going to be here forever. Oh yes, I knew I was going to tell you. Since the early hours of the morning, up until about half an hour ago, we had a big force-8 gale raging in the North Sea. But now, the sea is very calm, very smooth, stars are out, the moon is shining, and it's a beautiful, beautiful night.
Let me wrap you in my warm and tender love, yeah.
And he used to do a good night spot, as I recall, which was just the most intimate thing I'd ever heard. He used to say good night to a particular girl, and he used to have all the music up in the background and lots of nice mellow soul music. And it was really entertaining listening, but it was intimate. You felt that you knew him. You knew when he was in a bad mood. You knew when he was in a good mood. You knew when he didn't want to talk. And he's very impressive as a broadcaster, and he had a strong influence on me in a sense, in that I realized that what radio should really be is a kind of one-to-one relationship. Johnny never said, hello, everybody. He would always say, hello to you. And to this day, I really hate that kind of hello, everyone attitude. So Johnny, in a sense, taught me not to do that and taught me how to relate on a one-to-one basis on the radio.
Oh, jingle, jingle, jangle, jangle, bells, bells. Lovely, isn't it? And a big thank you to DLT for the last 2 hours. Yawning Johnny Walker, who was up late last night celebrating a mate's birthday. Anyway, a very warm welcome to the programme. From now until 3 o'clock, we've 2 hours of nice early afternoon music for your delectation this lunchtime. I'll be looking at the stars at shortly after the 1:30 news for our general birthday forecast, and then a housewife birth chart, of course, at 2:15. So stick around for as long as you can. Now, 4 minutes after 2, back to music with Aretha Franklin and her new single called Rock Steady.
What I feel now. Let's call the song exactly what it is. Step and move your hips with a feeling from side to side. Sit yourself down in your car and take a ride. And while you're moving, rock steady, baby. Let's call this song exactly what it is. What it is, what it is, what it is. It's a funky and love I'm feeling. What it is. In the hips from the left.
Last night I was fiddling around in my studio at home, fiddling with knobs and things, and I thought, oh, let's do an underwater jingle. Why not? And then I thought of a few dozen reasons why not.
Steal his wheel, 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 steal his wheel. Well, I'm stuck in the middle with you, and I'm wondering what it is I can do. Is it cool to fall asleep on the floor? I don't think that I can take it anymore. It's to the left of me, twist to my right. Here I am, stuck in the middle with you.
I really got into Kenny Everett, I think, when he was on Radio 1. I don't really recall him on the Pirates, although I do remember the Kenny and Cash show as a brand. That must have been the first time I'd heard him. I think he was one of the first few DJs that really, in the studio, somehow created their own atmosphere. He had his own agenda. And really, he was really going to do whatever he wanted. I don't think he had any regard whatsoever for management. That's one of the reasons I liked him. Of course, these days, I love the management myself, and always have. But enough of me. He also was one of these characters who decided to talk about something and then just went with it, and often rambled. And I never had any feeling that he was camping it up in any way, if you know what I mean. He just, I don't know, he was like a gossiper. He was like a housewife. He was like a house husband. I don't know what it was, but he just basically used to ramble. But it was only later, you know, after having a bit of a career in broadcasting myself, that I realised that actually it was all planned. And that not everything, but most of it was scripted. Some of it was pre-recorded. And he would spend hours and hours and hours making jingles, coming up with things to talk about, thinking of something stimulating or interesting to say, something that's going to annoy, something that's going to amuse. And I just thought he was a genius. What I used to do is tape the show. I just used to tape the show. I used to have this old tape recorder. I used to plug it straight in and just tape the bits where he used to be talking, cut out the music. He was that good.
I hope you like the records I'm playing on my groovy gramophone. Just stick around and you'll hear the latest on the electric radio. There's lots of fun on Radio 1. Lots of fun on Radio 1. If we miss out one of your favorites, write a postcard, let us know. Our only aim is keeping you happy on the Kenny Everett Show. There's lots of fun on Radio 1. There's lots of fun on
He had a beautiful choir boy's voice, I thought. There was always, I think, a vulnerability about his voice, and his singing voice, I thought, was most like him as a person. But he would do this incredible stuff, like he would find some library music, and then the music would be quite bland, but he would sing his own tune to it. And one of the things I remember, he used to sing this thing. He took a B-side to a Cloda Rogers hit. I can't remember the name of the hit, but he took the intro, which was basically a little 15-second piano piece, tripled it up so it now ran for 45 seconds, and sang a jingle over it. And, I mean, it's so obscure. Only Kenny Everett would do that. And it's memorable even today, all of these years later. I mean, it's so good. I always think that a news story is good if you remember it next week, and a jingle is good if you remember it 25 years later. And this was a jingle that went, "This is Radio 1 with another golden song
to delight you at home, spinning on the gramophone. So pull up a chair and settle in while we give it a spin, give it a spin, give it a spin, give it a spin while we give it a spin, give it a spin, give it a spin, give it a spin while we give it a spin, while we give it a spin." Turn on the radio every day, how simply wonderful. Hooray, 247 is where you'll see music and laughter, BBC. Everything is wonderful on Radio 1. There's such a lovely lot of records and it's bundles of fun. And every now and then there's tons of jolly jingles and all. So everybody is listening, having a ball. 247 meters is the station to be. If you would like to listen to the greatest records with me, just sit and hold tight. Don't move, Auntie BBC is the groove.
Without being pretentious, I would say that if he were a painter, an artist, I would have him as Salvador Dali. A lot of people say that Kenny Everett, he derives some of his act from the Goons, but I don't think so. I think the Goons were anarchic in their own different way, and mainly because of the genius of Sellers and Spike Milligan. But I don't think Kenny was like that at all. I think he was in love with the medium of radio, in love with sound, and he knew what he could do with sound. It was about that, and it was also about chucking around the medium. I don't think in style I was inspired by Kenny Everett, but he was certainly an inspiration in terms of jerking the medium around a bit for your own ends and ultimately to entertain people. The other thing about Kenny is that he had his eye on the ball. He knew what was entertaining. He managed somehow to paint pictures that didn't exist. It was the original theatre of the mind. To pretend that he had a butler was just terrific. And I remember some other characters, Basement Bill. And he used to do all the voices himself, and they were quite obviously Kenny, but you would suspend your disbelief for the moment that they were on. And he was the first to do this talking over himself. So what he would do is he would run a tape of himself as this character. He'd have his little script in front of him and talk along live with the character. I mean, that's fraught with danger in itself. Believe me, I've tried it. But he would hit it dead on every time. And some of the characters were just sensational.
I've discovered a way of keeping this programme really fast and going and really get 20 records into the space.
Really, sir? Yes.
Just by keeping air out, you know, keeping granny.
Yes, yes.
I heard that, you two.
Back to the broom cupboard, madam.
Conspiring against me. I'm just a feeble female.
Oh, Lobelia.
Crisp, come into the corner and help me to get off this blues.
Yes,
I've
madam.
just developed the blues, dear.
Give me your hand, Lobelia.
Oh, Crisp.
Oh, Lobelia.
Oh, this is such a romantic moment. Somebody get a camera or a bucket of water or something.
Could we have a little romantic...
No, we can't. Mr. Bassman's on you, silly twist.
Mr. Bassman, you've got that certain something. Mr. Bassman, you set that music thumping. To you it's easy. When you go 1, 2, 3, bidi-ba-ba-ba-ba.
Now you.
Oh, that's got to be one of the most hilarious records ever written. Mr. Bassman by Johnny Sim. There's a bit in the middle where it goes horrible, isn't there? Where they all join together. It's exhausting, the wireless, isn't it?
Oh, it is indeed.
Get him for this. Hey, Stuart. Stuart? Stuart? You won't let me talk to him now. Just want to say, how dare you have Davy Jones on your show? Mind you, I've got John and Paul. Yes, there's definitely some music coming up, Ken. I should prepare for a show if I was you. Okay, I will. Tears in vast abundance for this one, kids. Now, all together now. Sad to say. Sad to say, but I'm going away, 'cause it's the final show. And I've just got to go. Yes, indeed, friends. This is the last show of the series. So if I can fight my way through the tears, I shall play a few records for you. Like this one, for instance. First on the show, Bruce Chanel. The title of which is Keep On.
Keep on.
Oh, made it.
Keep on doing whatever it is you're doing to me. Keep on getting through to me. Keep on. Keep on loving me.
I often wonder where Tony Blackburn got his style from. There is another fella who is totally and utterly unique. He hit on the idea of, again, introducing humour into a top 40 format. But basically what Tony was and is a comedian. And instead of being a stand-up comedian, he's a sit-down comedian. So he used to come on and sit down every morning when I was a kid. I was going to school. Whenever I hear Tony Blackburn's voice, I always think it's time to go to school. And Tony was always there. He must be the world's most reliable broadcaster. And Tony basically introduced the 1- and 2-line gags into radio. And often those things used to make up his entire link. 1- and 2-line gag, into a jingle, make it short and zappy, into a record, where you go. Time check, little bit of topicality. And that was Tony's style.
Years may come.
Years may come.
Years may go.
Years may go.
go. Number 11 this week from Herman and Sir Hermit, and that's a number called Years May Come, Years May Go. I'd like to play that last one for some friends of mine who I had the pleasure of staying with last night. I sort of slept around at their house. Do you know they made me make my own bed? They gave me a hammer and some nails.
The Tony Blackburn Show. Out of sight.
Just for a gimmick, I'll play you another record now. 21 minutes past 7, and this is the new one from Creedence Clearwater Revival.
Rosco, the Emperor Rosco. He was a guy who came on British radio, I think, in the late 60s, and was so wild. He was like an animal let loose out of a cage. It was just completely, totally and utterly compelling. I couldn't understand a word he was saying, but I don't think that it mattered because he was creating an atmosphere that was fun to be part of. And he was playing the kind of exciting records that I like to play. And I always remember he was on Saturday lunchtime. And it was just something that you must tune into just to get a blast of excitement. It was almost like a drug. And once you heard this lunatic, you felt good for the rest of the day.
Out of sight there. That was Miss Anne from our cleaning lady who keeps everything spick and span. Mercy! Getting on with Mr. James Brown and the famous Flames. Hey! Great! Cassable! Like to wish all the luck to our new newsreader on Radio 1, Brian Emperingham. No relation to the Emperor, of course.
Hey! The Rosco Show was a copyrighted feature and may not be reproduced in whole or in part. Whole or in part.
Copyright 1972.
The Super Soul Machine goes back in time. Do you remember? These are the Isley Brothers.
You're listening to Steve Wright in his own words. If you want to hear more from our celebration of Steve, just search Steve Wright in BBC Sounds, where you'll find other shows marking what would have been his 70th birthday. These will include a listener special hosted by Lisa Tarbuck and a program of tributes from Steve's friends from the worlds of entertainment and broadcasting.
To say that Paul Burnett influenced me because he was always very, very funny, and still is, and a great broadcaster, and struck always by his enthusiasm on the air. I mean, never ever would he sound depressed, though he didn't want to be there. And he would make little kind of jokes, gaffes and stuff, and he would always rescue himself. He was brilliant. A real proper human being on the air, but also immensely funny. And just great.
I'm not going on.
You're not going on?
No, no, I'm too uptight.
Oh, dear.
I'm so uptight today. I'm just so annoyed.
Oh, what's that?
Have you got your car in here today?
I have.
Well, you'd know. I mean, you just can't move out there.
Oh, the traffic was a bit bad.
God, it's bumper to bumper on Marble Arch, Piccadilly, Oxford Street, Lower Regent Street, Regent's Park, Euston Road.
Do you know what? Kenny Everett came out with a great idea on his TV show.
What's that?
He said that to make more room on our roads, all the Volvos should take the bumpers off.
I think it's very important for anybody in radio to have done real jobs and have a real life. So I've done quite a lot of that, working in marine insurance. I mean, I always thought that I would stay in marine insurance. What I don't know about hull damage, you could write on a match. I think that's the expression I was looking for. So, and kind of, if you like, I worked at the BBC in the record library and thought it might be a nice idea to try and get a job in local radio. So I went to BBC careers officer and I said, I'd like to work in BBC local radio, please. And they said, well, we've got a terrific job in this place called Rapier Data Control, and you can sit there and log all the programs. I said, no. I'd like to train to work in local radio. And they said, well, you could work in the record library. I said, no. So you know, I got a little bit frustrated, and I thought the best way would be to leave the BBC and to go and work in commercial radio. So I happened to run into a guy called Neil French Blake, who was setting up the radio station for London, Capital Radio as it became. But unfortunately, he didn't get the gig. But he did get the gig in Thames Valley land in Reading. So me and Mike Reed and a few others were lucky enough to get jobs in local commercial radio. And that was kind of at the start, in the first few years of commercial radio. And in local radio, you learn your trade.
There ain't no more. You've taken everything from my belief in Mother Earth. Can you ignore my faith in everything? 'Cause I know what faith is and what it's worth. Away, away. And don't say, maybe you'll try to come up and see me, to make me smile.
Rise and shine, wakey wakey, it's coming round to 11 minutes to 8, Radio 210 coming at you. 210 metres medium wave, 1431 kilohertz, 97 FM in stereo. Here's something from 210 Cares. 3/4 of a ton of garden earth, good quality in brackets, is on offer from Stephen Denton of Dawlish Road in Reading. Says Friends of the Earth. He's giving it away. His number is Reading 868-427, 868-427. And a note from the Hampshire County Council. All Hampshire County libraries will be closed on Saturday 26th, that's tomorrow. May 28th, Monday, and Bank Holiday Monday and Tuesday 29th. They'll reopen on their usual day and at their usual times after those dates.
Steve Wright, breakfast show. When do I get the money?
I think that there are DJs and DJs. So for that reason, I don't think I'm a DJ. I think I'm whatever you want to call us, broadcaster, presenter. It wasn't always about the music for me. And I think that that's probably a fair point to make. And people would say, well, he doesn't know much about the music. Well, in actual fact, I do. But I'm not one of those guys that would come onto the air and start talking about the music, because there are people like Paul Gambaccini, and there are people like John Peel that used to do that, and there are people like, well, you know, you name them. Those people are good at what they do. I thought I needed to do something else, and that was to be warm and friendly, be informative. I learned something very quickly in commercial radio, that there was something called meaningful speech. And at first I thought, don't tell me what to say. I'm not going to do this meaningful speech nonsense. And then I thought, well, look, if I can be entertaining or funny or run a sketch in or have characters or have some atmosphere in the studio, I'll kind of balance it out with a little meaningful speech, a little bit of information. So meaningful speech was invented by the Independent Broadcasting Authority, as they were. I guess they're now the Radio Authority. And these were instructions to all commercial radio stations. And I think this was a hangover, if you like, from the old BBC days, where it has to be some form of public service. So memos used to come round to all the stations, and when I worked in commercial radio, there were only 19 stations. And they would listen to an hour of your program and then report on what they considered was the amount of meaningful speech in any given hour. But, you know, far from being offended by that, I thought, well, you know, in a kind of subversive way, I thought, well, I'll try and throw in as much meaningful speech along with the entertainment. So, in fact, honestly and truly, I'm grateful to it. Because I think it made me slightly better. I'm more aware of not being too self-indulgent. That's where you play a very self-indulgent clip.
I know where you go to, my lovely, when you're alone in your bed. I know the parts that surround you, 'cause I can look inside your head.
Do you know what that song's actually saying? Well, I shall tell you, in my opinion, it's actually saying that You know, you can drive around in a big sports car, you can have a big house in the country, you can have a wire fence, you can walk around in flashy clothes. Really, but when you're in your bed, you're thinking the same as everyone else. Why are we here? Where did I come from? Where's it all going to? Interesting little song, that. Do you know, I talk such a load of rubbish, I really don't know how I get away with it. Every afternoon, it's incredible. I wish I got paid for it as well.
Is there something I should know? If it's true, then why keep it undercover?
There was a man there called Richard Swainson, Dickie Swainson, when we worked at Radio 210, as it was called then, in Reading in Berkshire. And I was there in part with Mike Reed, and also we were allowed to broadcast on our own. And I used to do this thing on, I think it was a Saturday night programme called Pop Party or something. So it had some kind of ridiculous name. And I used to let loose a bit on Saturday night, you know. It was a bit serious jocking, but more. And Richard Swainson used to tune in and he'd say, you know, you should really work somewhere else. And I said, well, I like it here. And so do you. So anyway, we forgot about it, and then he went to Radio Luxembourg, and he called me up and he said, do you want to work at Radio Luxembourg? And I honestly had never, ever considered it. It wasn't on my radar. I mean, I listened to Radio Luxembourg and used to listen to Peter Powell and Mark Wesley and Bob Stewart and all those people, but I never, ever considered moving to a different country to broadcast back to the UK. And I said, okay, shall I come up and see you? And they offered me a job right there and then. And before I knew it, by the end of 1979, I think I was already in Luxembourg. And I said to my girlfriend, do you want to come and live in Luxembourg? She said, no. I said, please. She said, all right, let's do it. So we went over there and we found ourselves broadcasting to the most of Europe and even the world at Radio Luxembourg. So it was me suddenly from local radio in national radio.
Compiled from news agencies around the world, this is Radio Luxembourg News.
And with the news at 10, this is Steve Wright. The so-called lamb war between Britain and France is over. The French have sent a letter to the British Agricultural Minister, Peter Walker, saying that the country will accept sheep meat imports from the beginning of next year. They imposed the ban, which was declared illegal by the European Court, in order to protect their own lamb trade.
When I got there, I couldn't believe it was actually in Luxembourg. And one has to go and live there. Luxembourg is a principality, very small place. At the time, I lived in a little town called Bonnevoie with my girlfriend at the time, and we used to have to walk to the radio station about 2.5 miles and walk back. Remember that Radio Luxembourg in those days closed down at 4 a.m. But you know, when we got there, we would turn the radio station on. Turn it on, the switch. And then do the show, hang around for about 3 or 4 hours. Somebody else would come on, and then Stuart Henry or somebody else would come on, and then we'd have to do another shift, maybe 3 or 4 hours later, and then close the radio station down. So you'd end up doing 8-hour shifts. But that was exciting. There we all were in Luxembourg on the big-time radio station, the number one station at the time across Europe, although it wasn't overly popular in the UK. Everybody in Europe listened to Radio Luxembourg and knew about 208. So it was one of those deals where it was a stepping stone, but it was also a great experience, but not necessarily a nice place to live. So I went over there for 6 months and did that. And while I was there, on Luxembourg, I was called up by a man called Stuart Grundy, who was an executive at Radio 1, and he called me over and he said, do you want to come over for lunch? I said, not really. He said, no, come on over, we've heard your show. We were driving somewhere, we've heard your show, and it sounds very exciting, like you're really enjoying yourself. There's a possibility something might come up at Radio 1, a Saturday night programme, I think. I thought I would stay at Luxembourg for years. But it was 6 months, and I came over and saw Stuart and had lunch with him. I spilt spaghetti all over him, but he didn't hold that against me, and he hired me.
Well, now, I had a letter from 65 Harris Drive in Kirkcaldy in Fife in Scotland. Yay! Says, Dear Steve, this is just a short note to wish you all the best for your first show on Saturday. Hope you have as much success and good fun with Radio 1 as you obviously had last year. That's what it says. Very happy New Year to you, and that's love from Elaine Kerr. Also, Anthony Ryan of 1 Brayton Place in Wimmer in Leeds sends his good wishes. Thank you very much indeed.
I'm beavering away on local radio, and I've worked for the news desk, and I've learned all these things on how to, interview, but suddenly I find myself in the big league, and I'm not entirely sure I was ready for it. So I came over, and I found myself on Radio 1 doing a Saturday evening show. I think before me was Tommy Vance, who I was terrified of, because it was Tommy Vance. It was the guy with the voice that I'd known and loved. And I suddenly found myself on Radio 1. I'd never been so nervous. And, even thinking about it now, I'm starting to shake. Because you think, how did this happen?
Steve Wright, in his own words, continues after the news.
This is Radio 2.
On BBC Sounds.
And on your smart speaker.
Play BBC Radio 2.
BBC News at 7 o'clock. This is Justine Green. There have been warm tributes for the former England football manager Sven-Göran Eriksson.